Today's webinar is about crafting accessible experiences with design systems. So if you're not here for that, maybe join one of the other ones. But if you're here for that, then you're in the right place. We have a pretty incredible group of people joining us today. Cynthia Romeo from Pinterest, Homer Gaines from Coforma, and Josh Mabry from here at Knapsack. We're all going to be talking about the careful art of making things that everybody can see, even if it means those folks who are just temporarily inaccessible or incapable of seeing it. We're going to talk about that as well. Upcoming events this month next month. I'm already in April. I'm like time traveling. In April 24th in Chicago, we're having another Patterns event. This is an event where we get the practitioners, the leaders, the folks who are actually making the things together with some of the industry experts to talk about the art of digital production, what it means to make things in a digital world. We've also got a New York event coming up. We do New York probably most frequently as a city, and also San Francisco. So watch this space and keep checking back at knapsack.cloud/events to find out if we're going to be in your neighborhood. Let's see. Oops, Q&A. We don't need to go to Q&A. We jumped ahead there. So why don't we get started? I want both Homer and Cynthia and Josh to introduce themselves. Maybe you guys can give us just like the 2-second pitch on what it is that you guys do, why we've invited you here, why and what this conversation is going to be about. Cynthia, let's start with you.
Oh, thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Cynthia Romero, she and her. I work as a senior product designer currently, like at Pinterest. And I have been doing a lot of design systems work and also accessibility. I also have an accessibility certification, which is why I'm passionate about accessibility. I'm always trying to learn more on that field. We are always learning. And yeah, so I'm from Brazil and I have been living here in the US for over a decade now. So nice to meet you all.
Awesome. Homer, how about you next?
Hey everyone, my name is Homer Gaines and I am a accessibility specialist and front-end engineer. Been in this field now, in the accessibility field now since 2001, and just really enjoy working with different teams at different companies, helping them improve their applications so that they're accessible to people with disabilities. During that time, I've also led a few design system teams and helped them craft, uniform experiences, through those systems. So happy to be here as well.
And Homer, you were at one of our most recent events in Atlanta. So we had a
Yes.
chance to actually see you face to face and hear some of the brilliance right out of the horse's mouth, so to speak.
Thanks, appreciate it.
Josh, you're on our team, on our Knapsack team. Introduce yourself and tell us what you do here.
Yeah, hey everyone. I'm Josh Mabry. I'm a software engineer here at Knapsack. I'm generally a full stack engineer, but I've spent a lot of my career working in design systems, building out component libraries, and advocating for accessibility. So yeah, I'm really excited to join everyone today and have this conversation. It's an important topic.
Great. I put it in the chat, but I'll remind everybody, if you've got a question, this Zoom webinar allows you to go directly into the Q&A feature right down at the bottom there. Just hit that Q&A button, ask your question, and we'll filter through them as we go. You can also just use the chat if you want to follow along and chat with us. And then Kim, who is kind of the brains behind the operation here, she's going to drop in our LinkedIn profile. So if you guys need to follow up with any of us or you want to talk to us privately, please do that. I'm sure Homer and Cynthia, you guys are quite comfortable having your LinkedIn profile shared. I should check before asking. You actually check those?
Yep, no problem at all.
Okay, cool. Excellent. Thank you so much. So why don't we start with a kind of big picture here? I've got some specific questions, but Homer and Cynthia, why don't you just tell us a little bit about the state of accessibility? Like, where are we as a group of designers and engineers and developers? Like, where are we in this thing? Because it feels a little bit like in the macro conversation that accessibility might go the same way that DEI has gone in terms of like, just like it's people's feelings towards it, like its importance. But this seems like way more important than just like, um, a general conversation. This feels like a very specific conversation to the value of organizations and the value of products. Oh, I know you want to start on this. This is like, I just pulled a
Me?
thread right there. Yeah.
Oh, great. I'm freezing up. The current state of it seems like it's in a panic, obviously, for obvious reasons. But me personally, I'm not trying to panic about it, even though I see a lot of chaos in this space and uncertainty. And the reason being is that accessibility is not just the focus here domestically. It's not just the one concern that involves one particular state, company, country, or anything like that. This is a global thing. People are all over the world. Technology is all over the world. There are companies who do business internationally. There are people all over the world with disabilities, whether those disabilities have been disclosed or whether they have been kept private, whether those disabilities start with a lowercase d or a capital D, doesn't matter. Even age will determine if someone has a disability or not. So as things are in flux, the one thing that remains constant in this is the fact that humans still need to be able to access the tools to be able to entertain themselves, shop, live. You know, we're not getting rid of us anytime soon, I would hope. So taking the eye off of, oh my gosh, it's DEI and all of that, we still need to make sure that people can access our tools to be able to do what they need to do. And if people can't use our tools, then if you know what, let's just throw the money side out there. I hate leading with that, but let's throw it out there. People can't access your tools. You don't make money. You don't make money. Your company shuts down.
Right.
You know, there are times where we want to lean in and appeal to someone's humanity, and appeal to their empathetic side. But a lot of times people just don't lean into that. They don't think about that. So it's
Right.
like, all right, cool. This is the reality of it. If people can't use your product could cease to exist, or your product may not have the same type of market share as one that is accessible.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so
Yeah.
I wouldn't say, what we need to start doing is thinking that accessibility is a global issue, not a localized domestic one, because this world is so much bigger than the ecosystems that we currently work in.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we need to be concerned about. You know, it's like we see that programs are disappearing, we see things are going away, but we also see that there are countries and governments and companies that still value it and still recognize that it's an important part of their ethos, the way that they work, the way that they conduct themselves, and the way that they view the citizens of their country, or even their demographics in general. Case in point, European Union. They recognize that having accessibility built in will benefit everyone from a socioeconomical perspective.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we do business there. We're no longer just siloed.
Right.
So getting out of that mindset, getting out of that siloed mindset helps you to look forward and still understand that this need is definitely necessary.
Yeah. Cynthia, let's hear what, or Josh. Looks like Josh, you were quick at the
Oh, I definitely want to hear what Cynthia has to say. Just to add to what Homer was saying, we every year we become more dependent on technology too, right? Like it's just
Hmm.
become more of a core, like fabric of our core, right? Like it's just how we do everything. So it's more important than ever to stay vigilant on this as these new technology, um, these interface paradigms come into play, whether it's through AI or just whatever new thing that we don't know about yet coming next, right? It's just
Yeah.
so it's a constant battle, so it's definitely not going away anytime soon. But yeah, I'd love to hear what you have to say, Cynthia.
Yeah, plus one, what Josh and Homer said. But I also feel like even that it feels that it's a macro conversation, actually, I have noticed a lot of progress on accessibility conversations when I started working with accessibility, I would say like 8 years ago. Like I didn't see a lot of thoughts on accessibility, like across design systems, design in general. It wasn't
Mhm.
like being part of the conversation. And today I feel so happy when I go like check an event, like Knapsack event, into the design systems event, like conference and Figma, and I see the accessibility topic coming. It gives me like a very excitement to see that. And also like I would say when you think about technology and social media, like it's a word that people somehow you can feel isolated being behind
Mhm.
the screen, and accessibility being this inclusiveness thought that it's not about a single person like your experience alone on the social media, but it brings people together. Like when you think on diversity, and even that we have the politics going on with GI and things like that, it also brings awareness because people they are speaking up. So I
Yeah.
think we have the power to speak up and to make the difference. And I see that happen too. I know it's a little bit bad to see what is going on like with the world right now, but it still like gives opportunity to people to speak up and to be recognized on the accessibility sense and to reinforce about the technology when you see like AI and we see like VR and we see a bunch of other new technology emerging, we can see how it's bringing that accessibility sense, how it's including more people to the experience. And we can see accessibility as innovation too. We see a bunch of companies doing AI work for accessibility to increase accessibility on the website. And this is amazing. I think the technology, it's bringing like some innovation and some very good highlight for accessibility as well.
Yeah. And to the point of why we're here convened here today, which is how accessibility and design systems work together. I think some of the things that you've mentioned, some of that individual experience, but also the larger experiences, we we kind of made our own bed in the sense that one of the problems with the initial way that we built and designed digital products is that a lot of this was done kind of hand rolled, right? We were doing a lot of work again and again in the canvas where we were trying to be creative, quote unquote, right? We were trying to say, hey, look, we want to be creative. We want to give the work its due. But at the same time, every time an individual participates in a larger organizational or product structure, they're also inputting their own biases, their own preferences, their own ideas into that. So talk to me about how design systems can help us see the bigger picture. How, to Kimberly's stats here, we've got people with disabilities with about 1.9 trillion. That's about 2 trillion in annual disposable income. That's a lot of people with a lot of opportunity to touch your product. How are we avoiding the individual inputs that are creating those potential, you know, disruptive outputs? In disruptive, I mean in the sense of a bad experience or a poor experience.
Yeah, I can start on that.
Yeah.
I think like when you think on design systems, I believe everybody thinks about the word foundations, right? It's the base of everything. if we build a design system that cares about accessibility, for example, there are many ways that we can use a design system to break the barriers and to help like everybody. Like if we think about tokens, design tokens, I really like considering the spacing when we're thinking about adding design tokens for spacing. I really think about tap areas, target areas. How can I make sure that this is accessible and it's gonna spread across the product? We think about colors, like it's not only like passing the contrast, but I really like think about the combinations. What are like the color pairings that we can create on design tokens that can help to spread the word and like to make sure that all the surfaces are like matching some accessibility guidelines. Also, one thing that it's part of the design systems, but also can help advocating for accessibility, it's content guidelines. How inclusive are we being on our content guideline message
Mhm.
that we wanted to include on the systems? It's not only on accessibility, but also like thinking about inclusive design. For example, like this example, it's so cliche in a sense, but an example, I'm from Brazil. I had a huge last name. And every time I wanted to fill up a form, like to travel, my last name wouldn't fit on the form and I would get an error message. And the system didn't know how to handle error message because I couldn't change my name. And I needed to go to the assistant, like the customer service, to
Right.
just be able to print a ticket because my name didn't fit on that form.
Mhm.
And it was being so bad to me because I'm like, okay, am I like an alien? Like, why I'm treated so different? Like everybody else can fly, and I can't because of my last name, and I felt terrible. But then, like we as systems designers, like I am a design systems person, I can think about that when I'm creating a component or an assistant. Okay, how do we handle like last names and how do we handle error message in a way that people they don't get stuck
Mhm.
to it? And how can I be innovative from the design systems like as Microsoft say, like SOFA extend to many, how can I do that from the perspective of the design systems? I think like we can do a lot, especially being part of the design systems because we have the power to create this consistency. And if we build and we embed accessibility from like the beginning of the process of the component, like talking to engineers, making sure that people know how to use our components, like thinking about documentation. Like the design system itself could be like a champion way, like to advocate for accessibility. If we have that on the documentation, we have guidelines, we have a resource to help folks to learn more about accessibility. We are like creating a very good like toolkit for people to learn more about accessibility outside of the design system. This is what I think, like from my perspective of design, like I think we have a lot of power and we need to know how to better use that power.
Great answer. Josh?
Yeah, the reason I kind of fell in love with design systems and component-based architectures is, you kind of think of them as these Lego pieces, right? To build up these larger structures. And that's where kind of we can tie in accessibility there is, as long as each of those pieces are accessible, right? And kind of building those together, you basically don't leave any room for non-accessible, construction or behaviors. Obviously, more complex interactions and things require some additional forethought, but just the whole basis of design systems around those modular pieces really kind of sets up the framework for more accessible applications, as long as you're focused on, uh, incorporating the accessible practices at each stage. This goes all the way to the top from just getting buy-in from stakeholders, right? Down to the software engineer implementing these pieces. So yeah, that's kind of how I see design systems enabling accessible interfaces, just by that modularity.
Josh, where does somebody start? So we got, almost 100 people on this call. Some of them are going to be at that early stage of the process. Others are going to be a little bit further down. Where would somebody start by bringing a design system and accessibility into the same conversation?
Well, like I said, at the beginning, it's really about getting the stakeholders, you know, whoever's giving you the money to build this thing, right? That's kind of step one, because if people don't want to pay for it, it's kind of hard to, find the time for it, because it does take some time and planning. So obviously, yeah, they're right at the top, making sure that everybody is kind of on board, building a culture of accessibility, right? Not just, you don't want just a few advocates within your team. Just having everybody on that same page is really important. And then obviously, like, down to the design, like making sure designers are familiar with best practices, making sure you have any kind of tooling you can. I know Figma has some plugins and such for checking accessibility. To that point, though, obviously automated testing, it only gets you so far, gets low hanging fruit. It's very important to get user feedback. So I guess that's the next step. If you can, if you have the capacity, try to find some people with varied abilities to help test and help give you feedback in the early stages, is really crucial. But again, this kind of all goes back just kind of building that culture of accessibility and making sure that everybody's on
Yep.
board to kind of have this all trickle down, and just embed itself in your system and your team.
Homer, tricks to get the people that are writing the checks, giving you money, as Josh says, how do you get them to be more sensitive to these things? Because, I mean, I know, just a couple of weeks ago, I had a horrible eye infection and I had a temporary disability, right? So I was unable to do this thing which we do every single day, which is look at a screen and make things happen.
Mhm.
How do we get that kind of sensitivity surfaced for the decision makers when many of them are able, many of them don't have to think about this stuff?
Yeah, that's when empathy sessions come into play. And for the sake of not making it feel like it's cosplay, you really don't want it to come off as that, like, oh, I am pretending to be someone who is blind or someone who is deaf or someone with low vision. The ways that I like to build that empathy to get, the stakeholders' attention or even leadership's attention is that I ask them to use their product without a mouse.
Mm-hmm.
Because now what I've done is that I've taken the focus off of what disability should we pay attention to. No longer are they asking, well, how many blind users do we have? How many screen reader users do we have? We're focused on you. It is now about your experience. Can you get through the login process without using a mouse? And in many times, they couldn't even get off the login page. Right there, that's why it matters.
Mm-hmm.
That's why accessibility matters. And then I explained to them the curb cut theory about how curb cuts benefit everyone, not just people with disabilities, especially motor disabilities. But I explained how when you build technology correctly, and when we're talking about design systems, as you build these components correctly, garbage in, garbage out. If you build the component incorrectly, you're going to proliferate those errors all throughout your application, therefore causing the same issues throughout your application. But if you build it correctly from the start, that becomes a non-issue. Now, granted, you do have to do the constant gardening where you're paying attention to how these components are being used over time, how they evolve, because as we continue to build our applications, yes, things do evolve. So you still want to have the checks and balances in there. But when I can make it a personal experience for them to show them the different types of friction points just for doing basic functionality inside their apps, that's usually the eye opener for them. Because if you bring it to leadership in a way that doesn't bother them, oh, I don't have that issue, so therefore, why should I be concerned about it?
Yeah.
I hear that often when I'm speaking at conferences. There's always someone that comes up to me, and I hear it so much, it's even a slide in one of my talks. People with disabilities don't use our applications. That's a lie, because what you are picturing is someone with a physical disability. Right. You're not thinking about someone with cognitive disabilities and what the range of that even looks like.
Right.
And then even then, when we mention someone with a disability, that person usually thinks on the far extreme side. It's never the minimum side of that.
Yeah.
But still, case in point, you had issues with your eyes.
Mm.
You are not blind.
No.
See the scale there?
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
still had you still had low vision. There was still something wrong with your vision that could not be corrected by using glasses or anything like that, which impacted the way that you use technology. Just because, you know, you had an injury to your eye does not mean that you stopped or forgot how to use technology. You still needed to be able to get through your day-to-day. So by bringing those stories forward and by putting those people in the hot seat, making them understand what it's like to actually, you know, have to deal with a keyboard, because not everybody's a mouse user.
Yeah.
That has been successful for me to get them to understand, okay, maybe we do need to invest in, you know, accessibility, and then also including this in the design systems that either already exist or what we're currently building out.
Yeah. How do we bring this back to the design system creation process? So getting those stakeholders, check writers, choosers to go through these sessions. And Homer, I know you've got a lot more information and articles on this particular topic. So please look up Homer's enormous range of awesomeness there. Some of the things that you revealed to us in the last time where we saw you in Atlanta was actually seeing the accessibility tool testing tools in the browser alongside the design system. Talk to us a little bit about these tactical ways that we can both reveal to ourselves and to the people in the process just what kind of level of accessibility we're dealing with right in the browser, like literally opening up and saying, look at what you're seeing. Well, this is not what somebody else is seeing. How can we reveal that?
Yeah, so like Josh mentioned, we have automated testing. There are various plugins that you can use that are browser-based. Plug them in, open up your website, hit scan. What that's going to do is give you an initial pass of the accessibility support for your product, your application, your website. Even if it's a portfolio site, you don't even have to be a company. You can just be an individual artist that's out there that's trying to sell your artwork. Well, you still want that to be accessible, right? Or you're trying to show off your portfolio because you're a designer trying to get a job. You still want that to be accessible because you don't know if the hiring manager or not has a disability or might be a power user. So it doesn't just apply to businesses. But there are those plugins. So you have Waves, you have Axe from DQ that you can use to do this quick automated testing. But my go-to, which will reveal a lot about an application, is the tab key. Just the tab key, pressing that will tell me a lot about how your application is built. Because as I hit that tab key, if I can't find my way around your application, I know that the designers didn't think about focus states or focus rings, focus indicators. I know that the engineers didn't think about using semantic markup, which natively receives focus. So now I have to hunt for where I might be. So now, because I know those two, that's what will allow me to start to inspect the code in the browser and look at the DOM to see what is actually being, rendered. And then I can tell you exactly what is wrong just by inspecting the DOM and what I'm expecting it to happen. The other thing is using screen readers. We have screen readers for every platform, even, if you're a Linux user, Orca runs on Linux boxes. But if you're Windows, Narrator is built in. You have JAWS, you have NVDA. If you're on Mac, VoiceOver, it's all built in. If you're on Android, Android has TalkBack. If you're on iOS devices, it also has VoiceOver. We have screen readers at the ready for us. We can fire up a browser, obviously, and read our content that way. We can have the content spit out to us, read back to us, and we can also see where it actually breaks. You know, I was testing some content a couple of days ago, and you know, there's kind of the discussion of, do we do web components versus components based on the technology stack that you're working with. And there's some limitations from an accessibility perspective with web components that should be taken into consideration when adding them to a design system. Because, like, for instance, Android was skipping over web components completely. It was reading back everything else just fine. The talkback was like, I don't know what this is, because it couldn't get into the shadow DOM. You know, so there are those problems there, but these are things that can be revealed to us in the browser without having to invest a whole lot into technology just to be able to understand what we're looking at or what we're experiencing. So browser plugins help with the automated. Then keyboard will show you really what's happening.
Like that. It's like a gateway.
Mm-hmm.
Cynthia, I know you can't tell us like the deep dark secrets of what's going on in Pinterest, but tell us a little bit about how practically this is going to play out for a team. Who's responsible? You know, you often think of accessibility as a bolt-on. It can't be, right? So like, how do we make sure that the team is doing what Homer is suggesting, which is changing the nature and the culture of how we work, so that we're not just bolting it on at the end like QA?
Sure. So one thing that I always like to reinforce, accessibility, it's everyone's job. That is not one person who should be responsible for accessibility. It should be like a team effort. And it sounds like kind of a little bit odd because I am an accessibility specialist, but I would say you don't need to be an accessibility specialist to do accessibility. Homer said a very good point about the resources available. They are free. Why can't it's there? Like there are so many plugins, there are so many tools. You can go to Figma and find like Figma community files, like plugins and things that you can use. It's available for anybody who wants to learn about accessibility. And for design systems, I think like the empathy that Homer mentioned, it's a very good way to show people to get involved on design systems. For example, when you go through what are like the core functions of the product, you probably have CTAs, form fields, checkboxes, and models, popovers. There are so many components that are core to how a product functions. And if you can get people like, hey, let's go through the screen reader together. Let's test how it looks like on a screen reader. You're gonna be very surprised. People, they're gonna be shocked. And they're gonna be embarrassed, like, hey, I have no idea that it was so bad. And sometimes they don't realize. Like testing, like playing with the tools helps you to get a sense, but also if you have the opportunity, I know that not everybody has the opportunity to do research, but testing your components, your design system with people with disabilities, it helps a lot, because even that we know how to use the tools, that we learn how to navigate through a screen reader, we are not regular users like on the day-to-day. So we may not perceive nuances that they will perceive, like the users will perceive. And it's not only screen readers, like there's so many things like keyboard navigation, how people navigate with voice, and like such small details on design systems, they make a huge difference. Like one label that you forget to add could destroy a whole experience for a user. So how are you addressing that? It seems so simple sometimes, like we hear people saying conference and on events, or even like when you're chatting with a colleague from the field, like, oh, but this is just like a small detail. It's not gonna make any difference. You were saying that, but you are just you. You don't know about everybody else. And I think it's very important to think when we're designing, like think on accessibility since the start of the process. It's very important because when we talk about disability, I think you mentioned that, Richard, about UI issue that you have. It's not like a permanent disability. It can be like anybody. I'm getting older and I'm having more difficulty to see. Like I need to zoom.
I
And
was
one thing
hoping you wouldn't notice that I'm getting older, but yeah, that's
and
undeniable.
one thing that I do a lot, like when I do presentations, I get I do a slide with a very tiny, like font size, and
Hmm.
everybody, oh, I can't see that. And I'm like, okay, I'm gonna make a point here. You're just not seeing that now, and I'm zooming out. But imagine if you, like, you're using screen magnification, you would need to do that all the time. You know, like you can do some tricks just to show people how it is. And one thing that is very important also, I think it's more like not design systems only, but any company in general. Can you think more when you go through like the recruiting process? Are we bringing more people with disabilities? Are we really considering diversity on the workforce? Because I think it helps us to learn a lot and having more people to advocate as well helps you to improve accessibility in the product. Um, I I don't mention that a lot. I'm colorblind, and I like to use colors, and people are like, "Oh, why are you using colors if you don't see them?" I'm like, "Why shouldn't I like use colors?" Like, it's the same thing, you know. Like, it doesn't mean that if a person is blind, they can't see a website. There are like alternative ways that you can leverage from. So there are so many ways, and I think like when you share your personal side of the history, like talking a little bit about your experience and getting to know other people with disabilities. It could be a permanent, temporary. It helps you to improve your product because you're gonna,
Totally.
oh, I
Yeah.
haven't think on that topic before. And I think like for design systems, the way that we can help the teammates to think about accessibility, it's providing tools and resources like checklists, as much as you can help. If we're passionate about accessibility, like, hey, let me tell you what I know, like you can learn as well. You don't need to be a specialist, you can learn here for free. I am a very firmly believer of education. I think education is a very important tool that we should have in any field, not only accessibility. And I believe like if you can provide training, workshops, or like make yourself available, like, hey, do you want to learn about accessibility? Let's chat in 101 and I can share what I know. Like sharing, it's a very like a powerful tool that we have.
I love that. One of the things that we should probably mention is the cost of not doing this work that we're describing. We recently were talking to a say Fortune 10 company, very large company, and they are currently fending off several very large, very expensive, multi-million-dollar lawsuits, specifically around accessibility. I think there's a very of a knee-jerk reaction to something like accessibility, which is like, how much is it going to cost us? How much is it going to delay the launch or the shipping of a particular feature or product? But yet there is a very real cost to not doing it. So Josh, maybe you can talk a little bit about how proactively design systems help us not only understand what the particular problems might be, but actually deal with them up front before we have to, get to a point where we're in a courtroom.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, it's pretty clear that it does tend to cost a lot more money to retroactively get your app accessible. Obviously, that's going to depend on how severe the violations are, right? Maybe just color contrast, just need to change a few token colors or whatever, but it could be much more integrated into your system. Perhaps you brought in a library they depend on for, a main feature in your application. Well, it turns out that library had no considerations for accessibility. So now either A, you find a new library that has that, or you spin up your own or patch it or whatever, right? It starts to become a bit of a can of worms. But one important thing to remember in all this is that you don't have to start from scratch, right? There are obviously tons of resources out to learn about these things, but then on top of that, there are component libraries and systems that are already kind of built with these accessible pieces in mind. So using those, extending those, or however you need to incorporate them into your system is definitely can be a good way to start. But obviously, it's the education piece, as Cynthia mentioned, is really important in all of this because you don't know what you don't know, right? And so until you start getting out and learning about these different kinds of violations, different kinds of just different kinds of users that might be leveraging the system. We've talked about permanent disabilities. There's also temporary disabilities, say you broke your arm, or just situational disabilities. You're holding a child, right, in one of your arms. These kinds
Yeah.
of considerations. But yeah, really just like I said, just baking that in the beginning, getting that education early on, and just reaching for tools that have already solved these problems, right?
Yeah. Yeah, we're
And
deep into this, right? We're 30 years into digital. Like both Cynthia and Homer said, this is everybody's job, and the tools are free, and it's really right there at our fingertips. I'm going to go to the questions. We've got a question in the Q&A from Alexis. How can designers and content strategists collaborate to create more accessible design systems? Cynthia, I know you were just kind of at the beginning of this conversation mentioning how content strategy affects the way that we lead design or go into these accessibility conversations. Can you talk to the idea behind how do we collaborate? What maybe some practical tips for the audience that they can go and do that like this week? Like what are the practical things that we can do day to day?
Sure. So I think if we could have a content designer on any team, I highly suggest that. But if we can't, we can always reach out to content designer friends for help. On design systems, especially like if you're creating a banner and you need to think about the language, about localization, and how you wanted to pass that message, like having a content designer reviewing your work, it's gonna set it for the success. And we also need to think about cognitive disabilities, like how are we writing the message? Is that like clear enough? Like the alignment, is that complex for people with dyslexia? Like how do we prevent like creating troubles? Like content should be to help the system, to help people, not to create a barrier. So having somebody like with content expertise, looking at your content, thinking about the principles that you wanted to share on that component, it's very helpful. I see like localization, it's something that comes a lot in any design systems team because like, oh, I don't want this line to wrap in 2 lines, but it's in German. And this is too big. What are all the type of words that you can use that it's universal, like recognize? How can we think on that together? Also, like thinking about your audience, like content plays a very important role too. If we're talking to a global audience and you have different types of audience, different types of age, well, how is your language? It's going to speak to that person. I can give myself again as an example. When I moved to the US, I didn't speak English. So I had the amazing idea to start my life in a different country without knowing the language. Cool. It gave me challenges. And on the beginning, I struggled a lot, like reading materials because the words were too complex and they could make it simpler. And today, as a designer, I think I can make it simpler. And I think like engaging with content folks and reaching out to people if you don't have a content designer in your team, try to reach out to them and people usually they appreciate when you reach out to them, like, hey, I'm working on a project. I wanted to make it more inclusive. I wanted to make it accessible. I need to think about the labels. I wanted to make sure my labels, they make sense and they read on the screen reader. People, they usually they are very good on answering that question for you, and they are like happy to help.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point, Cynthia. So I grew up in South Africa. I came to the States, and believe it or not, I also had to learn to speak American. I don't know. They speak English, but I don't understand what version of English they speak. It took me a long time. But I think what was really surprising to me, and also continues to be something uh, that's elevating, is the willingness of other people to help. Reaching out and just saying, whether it's on LinkedIn or some other, platform, just saying, I need help. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm struggling here. I'm new at this job, or I've been given these tasks. Just asking for help, with whether that's in your organization or externally in the broader context of community. I am always shocked and surprised in a good way how willing people are to help. And I think that's part of this, this webinar is that, but I think that's just a generally good attitude to have, which is you don't have to be the expert. You can allow people like yourselves, like Cynthia and Homer and Josh, to be the experts and reach out to them and say, I don't know, I need help. And whether that's a light casual interaction or something more professional, or engaging in terms of consultative work, I think that's really important. I think we need to get back to that. We've kind of, like, Homer, you mentioned silos. Organizations tend to silo, countries tend to silo, individuals tend to silo as well. We think, wow, I'm in this hole and I don't really know what I'm doing. I'm just going to keep staying in this hole. Or maybe I'll wait till I get that certification, or wait till somebody gives me permission. But really what we need to do is reach out. And I think that's part of accessibility, is not only reaching out so that you can make your work accessible, but make yourself accessible. It feels like that's part of the story as well.
Yeah, and one thing I just wanted to add to that, I can't believe I'm gonna say that, but I will. Like AI helps too. When you like know the right prompts, like in asking AI for articles. I wanted to learn about this topic. Can you point me articles or like course? We're gonna have like a lot of results, and you can learn yourself, like try to learn. And again, like mostly of the accessibility resource, they are free. So you can self-learn and even like tips for content design, you can leverage technology as well, like to try to get some tips and how to get started. And it's available, at least the basics that you can use, it's available for you. And I think it's not wrong to leverage from that.
Yeah. I just want to remind everybody, we've only got a few minutes left. So if you've got a question for this group, now's the best time to ask it. Josh and Homer, I'm sure you guys are sitting on your hands, desperate to talk about stuff. Is there a topic that you wished we had brought up? And I'm also thinking about in terms of what Cynthia just said about AI. Are there trends, new technologies, new things that are happening that we're seeing influence or change or even redirect accessibility?
I think we covered the bases pretty well. Just as thinking about like, other questions we could have covered. But yeah, around the kind of mention of AI, and then there was kind of mentions around like VR, mixed reality, things like that. Um, yeah, I think it's important just to stay educated as these technologies evolve.
Mhm.
Maybe thinking about how some of our current paradigms or accessibility guidelines can apply to these medias. Around kind of AI and assisting in the work. I think one of the important things to consider there is, if you are using AI to help build components or, maybe design stuff, kind of adding the accessibility piece as part of the prompting there, right? And it's the same with like, delegating work to an engineer or something like that. Unless they're really, big accessibility advocates, unless they've run into these issues, many times in the past and had a, correct course, they're not necessarily going to think about accessibility as the top, confirmation for releasing that ticket. So just, yeah, adding that as part of the guidelines for humans and AI, right? As you move forward. But yeah, I don't know. It's kind of, a lot of it is, time will tell. Like which of these interfaces are going to kind of gain traction, which we're going to see, on our day-to-day lives. Who knows? And as it is with web applications and accessibility, things are always changing and moving. So, circling back to Cynthia's point, just education is key. Just staying knowledgeable and
Yeah.
and on top of things. So.
Homer, I've got a question based on something you said earlier. The
Oh.
question is in the Q&A. Andre asks that, or he says that he has been using the screen readers, and he says it's been a little while since he tested out JAWS, but he asks, why isn't there a Google Chrome Firefox extension that does screen reader basic functionality? He says, I find this crazy and frustrating.
Why isn't there a Google Chrome that does screen reader, like an
Google
extension?
Chrome or Firefox extension?
Because there's already companies building screen readers. So screen readers are complex, much larger than anything that would be put into the code for an extension, because it comes with customization. It also has to support the operating system itself way more than the browser. This was years ago, there was a plugin that tried to do it, and honestly I cannot remember the name of it, but it was only available for Chrome, and it was atrocious. It missed the mark on so many different levels. Chromevox, thank you. Yeah, Phil, yes. Chromevox, oh my gosh. Yeah, it was as someone who uses screen readers, that thing was annoying to use. So much that it was a joke to even try to pull it up, and it was because of my frustration with the browser-based version of it that I actually found NVDA. So that's my screen reader of choice. I love NVDA. Those guys do an amazing job with that software. Yeah. And NVDA is open source as well. So donate to them, shout out to them. They do amazing work. So, but yeah, that's why we don't have, the browser-based versions. It's just too heavy to run in a browser.
Yeah, one of the deals too is that all these all these technologies work different too. That was one of the frustrations I ran into doing like auditing and testing, because you have to go through and try to test on these different screen readers, just because, I don't know. I can speak for a while on this. There should be a standard. I don't know why there's not, but that's the world we live in. And so, yeah, it's maybe
it's called competitive edge.
Capitalism.
That's what that is.
Capitalism, yeah, late stage.
That's what that is.
So yeah,
sorry, I was going to say, Josh, there's also a question from Mariana here about what books or resources that you would recommend to learn more about accessibility. It seems like she's a researcher, and she's looking to broaden her interest in other disciplines. So what do you guys, you say, but all three of you have said education is important, but where are you getting that education? How are you educating yourselves? And how would you recommend somebody go and find ways to find this information?
Let's start with the W3C. Let's start at the WCAG. Let's start there.
Take from the source.
yeah, go directly. I want some water. Oh, look, there's water. Go there. Start with the WCAG. The latest version is out, Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 2.2. It's a riveting read. It's really actionable and everything like that. No, but start there, because you will find a lot of answers to your questions, and the reason why things are done. In addition to that, there are a lot of user groups that are working to help advance accessibility on all the fronts. For example, there's KOGA, which focuses on the cognitive aspects of accessibility that aren't necessarily covered in the WCAG itself, but they provide first-person accounts of how accessibility affects individuals with disabilities. And those use cases, they also provide personas that you could borrow to help leverage and steer, your product decisions. So there are all these different user groups. A friend of mine, Todd Libby, he's working with a user group where they are investigating deceptive patterns inside usability, because yes, accessibility is being able to access and being able to use the application, but it is ultimately a usability issue where we have put those blockers in that prevented somebody from being able to use this. And so they're looking at all these different patterns that can negatively impact the user experience for the sake of trying to trick somebody into accidentally checking on something that they're not supposed to. Unsubscribe is notorious for that. So start there. Start with the W3 and start with the web content accessibility guidelines that has been linked in the chat.
Yeah. We're drawing to the close of this, and I literally have to go and catch an airplane. So
run fast.
Gotta do that. I want to thank all of you, Josh, Cynthia, Homer, for joining us today. I want to also thank the audience for making time today to listen in on this really, really important topic. We didn't get to answer all the questions. I apologize for that. Kimberly, I think we'll probably do this again, right? This has been one of a topic that's come up again and again as a webinar priority for a lot of people. So Homer, they know where to find you. Cynthia, they know where to find you. Josh, they know where to find you. We put your LinkedIn profiles in the chat. If you need to reach out and talk to us directly about design systems, you can either reach out to me or go directly to sales at knapsack.cloud. Thank you all. I really, really appreciate your time and your interest and your knowledge, and I hope to see you all again soon.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
It's been a pleasure.